Yep, got it.
Kumlen and Ablat Gemara. Today's blot is Daf Yud Zayin of an Aleph. And we'll start from the beginning of the second Perek. Akoide es ha-Megillah lemafreya. If somebody reads the Megillah backwards, what exactly does it mean backwards? We actually have three opinions. We'll come back to it. If you read it backwards, lo yotza, you are not yotza. We'll see later what that means. Number two, kara al peh. If you read the Megillah orally, or kara targum, or b'chol lashon, you read it in the targum or any other language. Targum we learned before, was from Rabbi Lezer, Rabbi Yeshua, and so on and so forth. So he might have thought the targum is something special. No. If you didn't targum any other language, you are not yotza. But you can read it to somebody who only speaks other languages. Laws or Laz is an abbreviation, Lashon Am Zu. They speak the native tongue. If you read it to them in other tongues, for example, somebody who speaks English, you read to them in English, or so somebody speaks English, but they heard it in Hebrew, Yotza, you are Yotza. It seems to contradict what he just said a minute ago. A minute ago, he said, if you read it in any language, you're not Yotza. And then he said, if you read it to somebody in their language, that you are Yotza. So there are different ways of understanding Pshat in this Mishnah here. Whether the Pshat in the Mishnah is that you, if you read it in another language, you're not Yotza. But if you read it in the Hebrew text, other languages, maybe you are Yotza. Or maybe the first part is talking about in a language that they don't really understand, and therefore you're not Yotza, but here we're talking about that's the language you understand. Ashuris means Lashon Kodesh. Now, Lashon Kodesh obviously is not Ashuris. Why is it called Ashuris? Is because the Gemara says in Sanhedrin Daf Chabeze, because it's a rich language, or because the alphabet. So it's either describing the language itself, we call it Ashuris because it's rich, or we're talking about the alphabet, and the alphabet came back with them, according to one opinion, from Ashur. Kora Sirugin, you read, and you paused, and you read, and Misnamdim, and you I guess you nodded off in between. Yotza, you are Yotza. If you were writing the Megillah, Dorsho, you were dashing the Megillah, or Magia, you were editing the Megillah. Im kiven liba yotza. If you had in mind while you were doing that to be yotza the mitzvah Megillah yotza blavla yotza. So here it sounds like mitzvahs require kavanah, but yet we learned in Rosh Hashanah in Bracha is a big argument whether mitzvahs require kavanah or not. If you hold mitzvahs do not require kavanah, what it means over here is while you're editing or writing, you're not really pronouncing the words correctly. You're pronouncing the words in a way to make sure that you have every letter covered. So he says, in Kivan Liba, if you pronounce the words correctly, then you are Yotza, but you don't have to have Kavanah. There is one opinion, the Magen Mishnah in the Rambam, and he wants to say that even if you hold that mitzvahs do not require Kavanah, but Megillah is different. Why? And he gives an interesting explanation. All mitzvahs have to do with a pu'ula, with a ma'aseh activity, and the ma'aseh speaks louder than your intentions. But where the mitzvah is just words, you're saying words, you're reading the Megillah, it's not that strong, then you actually need kavanah. So even if you hold that generally you don't need kavanah, but when it comes to Megillah, you do. Okay. Ksula was written in different kinds of ink, different colors, red, blue, sam, sikra, kuma, kakantu. The Gemara will explain the next few days what exactly they are. Since they're not the right black ink, they're not Yotzi. Alaniyor on paper or diftra on one side of the hide facing the meat. We'll talk about that also in the Gemara later. Yotza achete ksuba ashuris. It has to be written ashuris, which is Lashon Kodesh, al ha-sefer on parchment, ubediyah black ink. So here it seems to be saying al ashuris on. You have to write in Hebrew alphabet, and before we said that you can write in any language. So we'll discuss that later. Says the Gemara. How do you know you can that if you write it backwards, you're not Yotza? Amravad Amakra says the pasuk, Bik Savam, Kich Savam Kizmanam. You should write the Megillah the way it was written. It should be written. The Megillah should be written, read the way it's written, and in its correct time slots. Mazmanum lemafrelo. It's like a time slots. The 50, those who read the 15 cannot read the 15 can never come out before the 14th, and vice versa. Is af ksavam lemafrelo. So too, if you write the Megillah backwards, you're not Yotza. Says the Gemara, midday kriya ksiva hocha aksia ksiva. Does it say anywhere here about reading Megillah? It talks about the activities of Purim that you should do the 14th, 15th, and not change the order. The Chsiva says, "Lias oisi mishnah yomela." From the following passage, see what it says by Yom Me'el, the following day, in this Kodim and Nasa should be remembered, should be done. Ishkish is a chilul aseh, where we compare remembering, which is reading the Megillah, to the activities. Ma asiyah l'mafrei loy. If you're doing activities backwards, you're not yotzeh. Av zechidul l'mafrei loy. So to remembering, if you do reverse order, you're not yotzeh. Totally, we learned the same thing applies to halal. You have to follow the correct sequence. V'chein b'kriyah shema, you have to follow the correct sequence. And ubet tefillah and davening. And we'll go through them all. Now, Rashi Masechta Bracha says an interesting thing, that when it says l'mafreya by Krishma, and the same thing applies to others, is literally reading it backwards. So b'sharecha and beisecha and mezuzah, you're working backwards. That's how Rashi learns, which would seem, according to Rashi, that even though the Gemara negates that kind of reading and it disqualifies it, but if you read, let's say, sentences backwards, you would be yotze because it's a coherent thing. This isn't coherent. Unfortunately, I have a hard time with Rashi. So why do you need a pasuk to tell you that you're not yotze? I mean, if you read it backwards, it doesn't make sense. It's incoherent. So you need a pasuk to tell you you're not yotze. So therefore, you have two other schools of thought. One school of thought is we're talking about sentences. You should not take the sentence and read them backwards. That's what we're saying. But if you read the paragraphs backwards, you are yotze. And so Pascha's a number of shaynim. For example, Krishma. Because in the Torah, the order of Krishma is written different the way we say it. V'hayim Shema is written in Eschanon, and Shema is in Ekev. And V'hafta is in Ekev. So the order of the Parsha is actually reversed. So when the Gemara says you're not yotze backwards, they're talking about psukim. And the other third opinion is it's talking about even paragraphs. If you reverse the order of the paragraphs of Krishma, you're not yotze. And the same thing by Megillah. If you reverse the prokim in the Megillah, you're not yotze. So we have three ways of learning the Megillah. Either literally reading it backwards, which is Rashi, or like the Ritva says, the sentence is backwards, but the prokim, if you reverse the order, that's all right. And then you have the other Rishonim, the whole reversing the order in the prokim is not yotze. So now the Gemara says, how do you know that halal and all of these other things you just mentioned also have to be done correctly? It says about halal. How do you know that? Rabbah will have a few different ways. Rabbah said, the Chesivit says, Mizrach Shemesh Ad Nevoye. It says in the pasuk from the when the sun rises in the east until the sun sets, and it says Mahul Shem Hashem. So that's how you praise the Eibishter, just like there in the proper sequence. The same thing over here has to be proper sequence. What do you call it? Rabbi Yosef says, it says, Zeh Hayom Asa Hashem. This is the Hashem, the Megillah Chabach. So it has to follow the pattern of a day, night followed by day. It has to have a specific order. Rabbi Yehi Shem Hashem. It says, Yehi. It should be this way. And then you bench the Eibush. Again, it has to be a proper sequence. From now till tomorrow, in other words, there's the past, the present, the future, and that's how it has to be in the correct order. Okay, Krishma, how do you know Krishma? We had this exact same Gemara in Brachos. Also means say to Krishma. The Tanya we learn Krishma kiksava dibre Rebbe. Rebbe says, how should you read Krishma? The way it's written only in Hebrew, but no other language. Any language you prefer. My time of the Rebbe. How does Rebbe know that Shema can be read in any language you want? Omakra, tell the pasuk. How does Rebbe know that it only can be read in Lashon Kodesh? It says the how you. The Havahos and Yehud, it should be exactly the way it's written. It should be exactly in that particular order, in that particular language. But Abonon, my time of water, they say you can say it any language you want. Across the pasuk Shema. Shema means here, but also understand. Any language that you understand. So therefore, any language. But Rebbe Nami Yaksiv Shema. What does he do with the word Shema? He needs it. He we had in Gemara there in Brachos whether you have to hear what you actually say. Rebbe holds the word Shema is coming to tell you that you have to hear what you are saying. If you don't hear the word you're saying, you are not yotze. The Rabbanan hold that no, Shema doesn't come to teach you that at all, because they pass like Tanakama, command you don't have to hear what you said. Okay, so that explains that side of the argument. What about but Abbananami Bagsiba Hayu, what Abban do the word Hayu, which sounds like it has to be read exactly this way in Hebrew. That's what they use. You shouldn't read it backwards. But Rebbe, according to Rebbe, so Hayu means you have to follow the correct sequence, and not the syntax, but the sequence. But Rebbe, how does he know you should read backwards? Midvodim hadvodim. It says Hayu hadvodim. It could have said Hayu dvodim. Why have the hey? to tell you that it has to be in a certain sequence. Rabbanon, Dvorim, Hadvarim, Mashal. They hold that the Hadvarim, that's not something you can reference to teach a new halachas. Says the Gemara, since the Rebbe decided that we need a pasuk b'hayu to tell you that Krishma has to be read with Hebrew, it means had it not been for that pasuk, what for that extra word, what would we have thought? We would have thought that Shema can be read in any language you want. Is Lema Kasava Rebbe holds Kol HaTorah Kula B'chol Lashon Emet. Rebbe would hold that the entire Torah can be read in any language whenever you do a mitzvah to read the Torah. But when it comes to Krishma, the Torah says, no, here I want you to limit it only to Lashon Kodesh. Because the Yisal Gadatra B'Lashon HaKodesh, if you hold it everywhere else also, it has to be in Lashon Kodesh. So why by Krishma you have to single it out and say B'Hayu to be read in Hebrew? Saying, well, that's no proof. Could be Kol HaTorah Kula, could be in any language. Why by Krishma you need a special word v'hayu to tell you that that it has to be what do you call it? Sorry, Rebbe holds that Kol HaTorah Kula also is in Hebrew. So why Krishma has to be singled out? So I would have thought Shema. I would have thought because it says the word Shema, maybe you interpret the word Shema to mean to understand, which is any language. Therefore, like the Rabbanan Taki learned, because it has to be only in Hebrew. Now, what exactly does it mean, Kol HaTorah Kula? We would have thought that we were saying, according to the Rebbe, perhaps Kol HaTorah Kula could be B'chol Lashon or Dafka Lashon Kodesh. What's B'chol HaTorah Kula? Where else do you have to read from the Torah? So that some of the Shayin will learn Pshat. It means when you fulfill the mitzvah of Limud HaTorah, it has to be done Dafka Lashon Kodesh. And the opinion that says that the Kol HaTorah Kula, the Lashon Kodesh Nemra, it means that whenever you're learning Torah, you have to Lashon Kodesh. Otherwise, you're not getting to mitzvah Talmud Torah. That's what Taisus dismisses that out of hand. And Taisus learns it means the Parshas the Torah, like Parshas Zocher, the Rosh and Brachas adds Parshas Parah, and brought down also among Avram. And then we have also like Parshas Chalitza, certain portions of the Torah that you have to read. You have to read the parts of the Torah, and the question is in Hebrew or in other languages. However, there's what do you call it? The Ritva learned Pshat there, and the way Taisus understood Rashi, it seems Taisus learns this is what Rashi is saying, that the mitzvah of reading the Torah every Shabbos and Shul is Mehat Torah, not just Parshas Zocher or Parshas Parah, the entire Kriyas of Torah every Shabbos. And the Ritva says so clearly. There's a mitzvah Mahat to read the Torah every Shabbos and Shul. What did Moshe and Ezra add, which we'll learn later? Megilah, they added Monday, Thursday, and Mincha Shabbos. That's what the Ritva says. The Bach in Siman Tafresh Pei, can't remember Pei or Peches. The Bach says that reading the Torah every Shabbos is Mahat Torah because he says any takana that Moshe made is considered Mahat Torah. So here you have a few opinions and learn that Kriyas Torah on Shabbos is Mehat Torah. Now the Gemara continues. Lema, let's say on the flip side, Kasavi Rabban hold, since Rabban hold, you need a special pasuk Shema that you can read Shema in any language. I mean, had it not been for that pasuk, we would have thought that Shema had to be done in Hebrew. Is that the Chacham hold that Kol HaTorah Kula has to be Lashon Kodesh? Lema, Kasavi Rabban, Lashon Kodesh, the entire Torah. Whenever you have a mitzvah to read, the Torah has to be done in Lashon Kodesh. Because these are that's Lashon Nemra that the entire Torah can do in any language. Lama Michtav Shema. Why need a special pasuk Shema to tell you any language by Krishma? Says the Gemara, no Raya again. Itzich. Really, I hold Kol HaTorah Kula can be done in any language. But you know why Shema? You have to tell us that because otherwise you would have thought the word V'hayu limits it to Hebrew. So I would have thought V'hayu Kerebi. I would have thought, let's take the word V'hayu, interpret like Rebbe that it's limited to Lashon Kodesh. Kosach Shema. Okay. Tefillah Minola. And how do you know that davening? How do you know that davening is has to be done in a specific order and not lemafreya? The time we look at the Braisa. Shimon Hapikuli, we has in our brachas, has the Shmoine Esrei brachas. He organized the 18 brachas, Lifnei Rabbi Gamliel for Rabbi Gamliel, ala Seid in a particular order. Beyavne and Yavne. Amr Bechbechina said, Meya the Essems Kanim. It wasn't Shimon Hapikuli, it was actually a Sanhedrin, 120 elders over him, Kaman Adin, was Chagais Chayim Malachi. Tiknu, they organized Shmoine Esrei brachas ala Seid, 80 brachas in a specific order. No, but Shmoneses started from the Anshe Sagdoila before the second base of Migdash, and according to the Braisa, Shimon Hapikuli for Rabbi Gamliel Yavne, which is a couple hundred years later. Gemara later will ask, so which one is it? What do I need both for? What's interesting here is that Tosis talked about previously when you have a last name, and he said that the last name, we'll find this, he said that a last name, he used an example as Ibn Ezra. That's a family last name, which is not considered a nickname because the children and grandchildren carry the same name. Here you have an interesting name, Pekula, which we know here in Melbourne, the name Pekula, and Shimon HaPekuli had that last name. Rashi says Pekuli means that he was a merchant of wool. But if I remember, there's a Shalach Kodesh that says that Pekula has something to do with davening, and but that was his last name. Interesting. Anyway, the point is that there was an order to Shemon Esrei, and therefore the Mafrei not Yetzer. Now, what the Gemara is going to tell us is what exactly is the order of Shemon Esrei. And again, this is the fascinating part of the Gemara. If you ask anybody, so if I want to know the order of Shemon Esrei, which Masechta should I look at? First thing that will come to your mind is brachas. The Gemara talks about davening in the fourth Pedic and Tzulah Shachar, so therefore, obviously, it's over there, and yet it isn't. It's what? It's the higher order structure is right here. Parts of it in other places, but it's right here. Tell me what we learned. How do you know that the first bracha begins with Lekei Avraham, Lekei Yitzchak, Lekei Yaakov? Remember, it says Havul Hashem b'nei Elim, and it says 18 Mizaldor, it says 18 times the word Hashem. So therefore, we say we have that Rosh Hashanah, and therefore we say that this aligns with Shemon Esrei, and it starts off Havul Hashem b'nei Elim, the sons of the strong ones. So we talk about the ancestors. So that's the first bracha. U'menayin sha'oimim gevuris. Now, how do you know the second bracha is gevuris? Remember, it says after Gibur, it says Havul Hashem covered va'oiz, give him honor, but va'oiz and strength. Menayin Haino, the third bracha sha'oimim kedushas, talks about the Eibush's sanctification. Now it says Havul Hashem covered Shmai, Yishtachul Hashem b'hadras kodesh, the holy splendor. That's the third bracha. Umaro leime bina. How do you know that the next bracha is Ato Chaylav Das, which is all about wisdom and intellect after kedusha? Shenema, it says in the pasuk, B'Kdishu as Kadosh Yaakov. It says you should sanctify the holy of the Yaakov, but okay, Yisrael, the Eibush of the Yisrael, Yaritzu, that they shall applaud. And so therefore, we see clearly from here, after you make kedusha, then you go ahead and you and they applaud and everything else. The Samach, the next pasuk says, the Yedu Toye Ruach Bina. Those people who go astray will come to understand. So we see that Bina follows kedusha. So that's the next bracha. So why is the next bracha Hashivenu? Hashivenu, which is tshuva. Why is that the bracha following Bina? Because we have a pasuk, and the pasuk says, "V'lavava yavin." It's hard to understand. V'shavel b'tshuva v'rapalei, and he will heal him. So we see clearly from here that after he understands v'shavel, then you do tshuva. So that's why bracha tshuva comes afterwards. But the obvious problem is the next word is v'rapalei. He'll be healed. So the bracha of Einu should follow the bracha of tshuva. Why is slach lanu sandwiched in between? So the refuah of Einu should be following the bracha of Hashivenu. So we have another pasuk. I don't think so. The Chesiv, it says another pasuk. The Yashuv of Hashem, you will return to Hashem. The Rachameu, and you will have Rachmanas on him. Ve'lelakenu to the Eibush ki yar b'leslech. So it says clearly from here, after V'yashu, what happens? The Eibush will forgive you. So the bracha after tshuva should be slach lanu. So now we have two psukim. One pasuk that tells us right after tshuva is slach lanu. Another pasuk says v'shav v'rapalei should be the fe'enu. So I don't know which one to do. My chazid is samachai is samachai. Why you decide to follow this pasuk, not the other pasuk? We have a third pasuk, and that pasuk says hasalech l'cha v'nechi. He'll forgive you for all your sins. And he will heal all those sicknesses. So clearly here, the bracha of Feinu comes after slach lanu. And he will redeem from the I guess the Netherlands over in the bottom. He will give those who are liable. But what is he clear from here? That the bracha after slicha is refuah. The member of the gula refuah, but the slicha is a kind of mir that goyel Yisrael. It says here also Goyel Meshachas, that Goyel Yisrael and the Fe'enu come after Slicha. I Boksiv Lim before B'Shavat Aplei, that there should be L'chayder after Tshuva should be Refuah. Who love Refuah Tachlim, it's possibly brought in the beginning. That Refuah is a spiritual Refuah, not a physical one. A Refuah de Slichi, it's a Refuah of atonement. Okay, we'll continue. Ma'aro Le'Megula B'Shvius. And why is the geula in the seventh bracha? Okay, tell me why it follows the other one, but why it's another? There has to be a reason why it's after the seventh. And what was the other? We're going to be redeemed in the seventh hour. The Gemara goes through Sanhedrin every hour. It's going to be right before the Bias Mashiach, and the seventh hour is the Gula. So what are we talking about? We learned Bishish is in the sixth hour. Kailas. There'll be all kinds of loud sounds. Bishvi is Muhammad, the seventh hour. There'll be all kinds of wars. Going Mogunab. Shvi is Ben David, but only the eighth hour that David comes, not the seventh. So why is it that we are saying Goyal Yisrael on the seventh? It says Muhammadami is Chalta de Gulihi. This word Goyal Mogun is introduction or the precursor to Bias Mashiach. And Rashi explains the Goyal Yisrael here is not like the end of Shemnesser where we talk about it. Samach David Avducha, we talk about Mashiach. Here we're talking about just save us from all the tzaddas the current tzaddas that we have. But since we call it Goyal, so we're talking about this. Why is the eighth bracha refahinu? Because Mila was given in the eighth bracha. Because the eighth day, Bris Mila, is everyone needs a refuah to make sure the child is healthy, is well afterwards. So therefore, we made it fainu the eighth bracha. There's a beautiful story in Mishnah Magid that he had a chassid who was Baal Tshuva. He wasn't like, he wasn't Amslavia Chassid, he was just about Shuvah. And years later, he went to Yechidus, he's talking about problems with Panos, and Mr. Magid says, but you're a doctor. What happened to your medical practice? He said after he became frum, he dropped his medical practice. Why? Because he came across the Mishnah in Ene Kedushin where it says that Toiv She'raifim leGehenim. The best of the doctors go to Gehenim. And therefore, he decided that he cannot still remain a doctor. So Mr. Magid said he doesn't understand. He doesn't understand. It means as follows: Toiv is Gematria 17. There are 18 brachas in the Shemona Esrei apart from Balaam Hashin was added later on. So he said the Pshat Gemara, the Mishnah is as follows. One of the brachas in the Shemona Esrei is for Einu Hashem B'nei Rafeh. Who's the ultimate doctor? The Eibush. So this is what it says. If Toiv, you only believe in 17 brachas, when it comes to Fe'enu, where it says that the true doctor is the Eibishter, and you say, no, I'm very skilled and I know what I'm doing and I'm the doctor, then Toiv, if you believe only in 17 brachas, you go to Gehenim. But if you believe in all 18 brachas and you believe that no matter how good of a doctor you are, it's always Shayata the Shemaya to make sure that you do well. And of course, you're doing good things, you're saving people's lives, you're a tzaddik. So that's Pshat Nefein. Okay, continue now. So that's why we make it Feinu in the eighth bracha. Why is Baruch Aleinu the ninth bracha? This corresponds to those people who hike prices and exploit situations. You see what it says in Pasuk. Let's very interesting what it says. Shvor Zroya Russia, you should break the strength of a Russia. And with David was pleading to Hashem. I was talking about the pasuk over there. It talks about that. Rashi explains very nicely. The pasuk talks about somebody who ambushes and he's like a lion. And who does he ambush? He tries to steal from the poor. Now, since when do robbers steal from the poor? Robbers try to steal from the rich. How much are you going to make from a poor person? So the pasuk is actually describing those who exploit the poor. They hike up the prices. The rich can afford it anyway. They hike up the prices. Who is affect more the poor? Or when they make small little loans, I'm just adding this in, and they charge excessive interest rates, 10 to 20 times what a normal person pays interest. But who does it take it from? Dafka, from those who can't afford it, from the poor. And David asked Achmed, there should be such an abundant supply of food that nobody will have to, they won't be able to hike up the prices. So because David HaMelech said this in the 9th capital in Tehillim, the David ki Amra b'Chi Amra in the 9th capital, and therefore we say the 9th bracha. Now actually it's in capital Yud, but we say that the first two, remember my brachas, that the first two capital Tehillim, Lamarok Shugoyim, is one Pedic. Rashi has here Dafka a different girsa. He says that in the Gemara, and according to him, comes out that the 9th and 10th bracha are also considered one kapitel. Anyway, that's why it's a night bracha. Says the Gemara, Maro Leim Kibbutz, and this Gemara holds that the first and second are considered one, or the ninth and 10th of one. Maro Leim Kibbutz Goli is. Why is the next bracha all about Kabbos Shefer Godel, and you Kabbos and then all the Eden from all the world? See what it says, Atem you, Hare Yisrael Eden and Hare Yisrael, the Mount of Eden. And feichem titnu, that your branches will spread out. Pareichem tisu, you'll have your abundant supply of fruits. La'ama Yisrael ki korbu of it, because Mashiach is coming soon. So we say what? Well, you're coming back to return. So we're saying what? This is the so right after when you have an abundant supply of agriculture, people come back. The kivin shel skapsu goal is nasadim b'rishayim. Once everybody comes back, the Eibush will judge all the rishayim, which is a shiva shavtenu. Shenema, it says, "Vashiva yodi olech." I will stretch my hand to you, and I will cleanse out all the different alloys, extraneous alloys from it. See if it says, "Vashiva shavtaya kivarishayna," reinstate the judges. The kivin shenasa din min halashayim, and once the Eibush judge the shayim, kolu hapoishim, all of the poishim will be destroyed. The koil zaydim imam, it includes the sinners with them. It says the pasuk, "V'sheva poishim v'chataim yachtav yichlu," that will break all those sinners and the different levels of sinners, and it'll all be destroyed together. Then it said, "V'kivon shekolu hapoishim," and once the poishim are gone, then Misrei Memes Keren Tzadikim. That's when the tzaddikim will be elevated. See what it says, "V'chokarne l'shoyim agadeya." I will then completely cut down all the horns of the Rishayim, and to the Mamla kind of tzaddik, and I will elevate the horns of tzaddikim. The koil geri hatzadik. Said al tzaddikim, al chazidim, al zikam chuvishol, and then I played. It says about geri tzaddik. The geri tzaddik are included with the tzaddikim. Shenemer said, "If they save a takum or dark to pnei zaken, you should stand up for an elderly person." The samachle, and the next pasuk says, "V'chi yogurt itchem gei." So we see that gei is included. The Heichen Misrei Members Karnam, when will they, or where will their horns be elevated? In Yerushalayim. It says, "Shalu Shalayim Yerushalayim, Sha'as V'Shalom Yerushalayim, Yishloyu Oyavayich." All your friends and all those who love you, Yerushalayim, will have peace. The Kivon Sheniv Yerushalayim. That's the next bracha. Yerushalayim. After Yerushalayim is built up, but David comes David. It says, "Acha Yeshuva B'nei Yisrael." After the Eden return to the base that made everything else. And the beats of the Shem again is David Malchus. Ask the Eibush about David. The Kivon Shabbat David Basat Phil. And once David comes along, then the next thing is we start davening, asking, we should use the base of Mishnah. It says, "I'll be Eisim al Hakochi." You bring me to the holy mountain. And I will rejoice in the house of the Tefillah. The Kivon Shabbat Tefillah, and the next thing is to say, right after that, just after Shema Koleinu, when we're davening to the Eibush, we said, "Esem Adov Avdecha," we said, "B'Shleim Mircha," and we're going in order of success, successive events. And then we talk about it, say all about kabbalas. Why? Shneimar says, "Oilesei hem v'zivchei hem l'rotzen al mizbechi." All these kabbalas will be willingly done on mizbech. The kimesh ba'avoda basa toida. And once you do these kabbalas, you also already talk about the korban toida. Moedim anachnu lach. And it says, "Aver toida yichabdonani," that you shechte the toida and you will honor me. It says. So why is it after Moedim we then insert Birchas Kainim, at least when we daven with the minyan the Chazan does? The Chesiv says, "Vayisa Aaron Aaron lifted his hands, Vayivorchim, Vayedid, and he went down. He went down from. No, it was after he brought the Kabbalas, he gave them Birchas Kainim." Says the Gemara, maybe he said this as an introduction to the Avodah. In Elois that they can't think so. See what it says, it came down from making the Chatas. So therefore, it was ready after the carbon was made. Miksiv Lasa, does it say to make the Chatas? Me'asexi, from making it. The Limda Achar Avodah. Sorry, the Lema Achar Avodah. So why don't we say right after Avodah before we say Moedim, throw in Sim Shalom, throw in Sarbichas Kainim. Lois, I can't think so. To see what it says. By Toida also it says Zevech. It's like consider one of the kabbalas. My chazid the samchalahai smachahai. I know which pasuk to follow. Maybe just the chatas and the which is say, and then we should do bichas kaidim. I know after the Toida. Mistabra avoida v'hoida chadam milsi. It makes sense that avoida these kabbalas and Toida, which is also kabbalas, is one thing. Why is Sim Shalom the last thing there? It says, how do you finish Birchas Kainim with Shalom? And bracha HaKadosh Baruch Hu shalom. His bracha is shalom. So it says Hashem yivarech amay v'shalom. That the Eibusher benches b'shalom, and we finish everything b'shalom. So Shachris in the morning after Volotzin, we say Kaddish, we finish Oisa Shalom. At benching, we finish Oisa Shalom. So it's always Shalom. And by davening Meira before Shemoneh Esrei, so different is chayes. Some people say Poyde Shalom every single day of the week. We change it to Shemes Amo Yisrael Ad in the middle of the week. And the reason why we change it to Shemes Amo Yisrael Ad is because since you say Yidu Enenu, and this is interesting why Lababa does it well, but they say Yidu Enenu is for Shmira. How's it for Shmira? Because Tesis, where he told us we added it in so that people who come late to shul will be able to go back home together with everybody else. So because we added that in as part of davening, Golaricht and all that, so it talks about Shmira, so we changed Shemes Amo Yisrael Ad. The Ramban and the other Rishonim who say that you don't say Yidu Enenu. They go straight from Hashkevenu to Shemoneh Esrei. They don't say Shemes Amo Yisrael Ad. They say Hapeidah Sukkah Shalom every day of the week. Now let's go back to the original. There were 120 elders, there were a number of prophets, and they organized not just the Shemoneh Esrei, but the order. What did he do? Not that they forgot how to daven Shemoneh Esrei. What they did was they forgot the order, and he came along. Had no siddurim. He came along and he reminded them of the order is. From here on in, also now make up your own prayers and praise the Eibusher. It says, who has the right to say all the describe the Eibusher's strength? Yashmiya kol tilasi. Only somebody who knows how to give all of his tilts. Only somebody knows how to do that. Not us. We also have it for Moshe Rabbeinu and Brachos. If somebody indulges too much and uses too many praises, because whatever praise you give will never be enough. So you'll be uprooted from the world. It says, somebody will tell him what I'll say. If somebody says it, he'll be swallowed up. In other words, we'll never. There's a famous mashal the Gun gives. If why we say Baruch Hashem Melech Mahul Batish Baruch. The king is praised with all of his praises. Why don't we itemize them? So he gave a mashal once as a king who was I guess very self-conscious. So he once asked all of his servants to come over to describe a certain quality, a virtue of his. Each one got up. He's smart. He's handsome. Finally, one guy got up and he says, "The king has a terrible temper." The king got so angry. "That's my virtue," and he incarcerated him. After the king sort of calmed down a bit, he called him over and said, "You're nuts. I asked everybody to praise me. You got up there. You said I have a terrible temper." So he says, "You don't understand. If I would have said you're smart, what, you're not handsome? If I would have said you're handsome, you're not courageous. If I would have said you're courageous, you're not a skilled warrior. Whatever praise I give you will never be enough." So I decided if I could find the one fault that you have, and then everything else, you're perfect. And the same thing here. Simply because we cannot find all the praises that the Eibusher deserves, therefore we just don't say anything. It says more further. Dorash Rabbi Yehuda Ish Kvar Guraya. Rabbi Yehuda from Gvaraya Dash, Amla Ish Kvar Gibur. It says, for you, the best thing is to be quiet. What does it mean? The best thing is to be quiet. Sama de Kula Mishtuku, the best, I guess, recipe to be successful in life and everything else. Just be quiet. Don't talk too much. Amri Marav is a saying at Yisrael. Mila Besela. Well, a word is worth a sela, a coin, but mishtika, but being quiet is worth today too. Silence is worth more than speaking. There's a famous vort. I'll just finish with this vort. Mila besela mishtuk b'tei as follows. Moshe Rabbeinu was told to speak to the rock, but he didn't. He said he hit the rock, and as a result of that, Moshe and Aaron both got punished. So mila besela, mila is also words. The word that he was supposed to say sela to the rock, because he didn't say it, mishtuke b'tei. Silence of two great leaders, Moshe and Aaron.
Yeah.
Tomorrow night, Mr. Shem. And
Yep.
tomorrow night,